Hello and good morning. Welcome back to the Sex and Healing podcast. I'm your host, Erin Kyna, and thank you so much for joining me as we take this wild ride together through the realms of sex and healing. I don't often record podcasts early in the morning, but here we are today because we're coming up to the Balinese holiday Nyepi, which is the Day of Silence. And it's a holiday in Bali that I love very deeply. And essentially the belief here is that once a year on this new moon that signifies the ending of one astrological calendar into the next one, that the negative spirits will come through the town, and if everything's switched off, all the lights are out and everyone's in silence for 24 hours, then that negative energy and entities can pass through the island and leave. So it's this beautiful day of cleansing and is a fabulous, for me, an absolutely fabulous day to be here in Bali and living in this culture. So in preparation for that time away from the computer, I'm sitting down and recording some podcasts early in the morning, but the sun is shining. I've had my coffee and things are fantastic. So today's episode is inspired by a conversation I had on Instagram with one of my new followers. And we were talking about unconventional relationships and how we can strengthen unconventional relationships. So I really encourage you guys to reach out to me on Instagram. You will hear from me. I'm open to all conversations. I love to answer all questions. And I was really inspired by this conversation and excited to bring you today's episode about customizing relationships. So I really encourage you to share this episode if it lands for you with other people in your world that you think would benefit from it. If it touches you deeply, I would love if you feel called to leave a 5-star review on iTunes. And I also encourage you to subscribe so that you get every episode notified to you each week. So when we look at customizing relationships, now, you know, your girl is all about unconventional everything. But I don't think that this conversation is specific to poly dynamics or anything that obviously unconventional. I believe that every relationship should be unconventional to a certain degree because we are 7 billion unique individuals on this planet. And in every single relationship that we have, and now we are in relationship with everything. We are constantly in the state of relationship to others, to ourselves, to the world around us, to concepts and ideas. So in each of these relationships, we're dealing with two very different energies. And today I am going to be speaking about the dynamics of couplehood. And that's also because even in polydynamics, where each two people are relating, there's an individual relationship. And that's really what I'm focusing on today. You can have as many of those as you wish, but what can we do to customize and to strengthen that relating between two people? So we can have a look at the standard model of relating for our culture, knowing that it's completely different here in Bali and it's completely different in the Middle East and it's completely different in Africa. What is societally expected and common is going to be very different. So we're going to look at the Western model of the white picket fence and the couple with 2.5 kids, or that are moving towards that. So that's kind of the normativity that we're raised in, to kind of expect to build that for ourselves. If we don't have that, then there can be a lot of consequences around that regarding our sense of self-worth and our entitlement. And, you know, I was even thinking yesterday how common it is for so many women in my world who are not in relationships that the families will imply, what's wrong with you? Why are you still single? Why aren't you married yet? Why don't you have kids yet? There's all of this pressure to go and fulfill that normal expectation of society. So when we're raised with those kind of ideas embedded into our subconscious, then when we recognize that we're either not achieving that or it's not fulfilling us, if we have achieved that, then we can come against this internal battle inside of thinking that, you know, I'm the problem here. I'm not lovable. I'm not attractive enough. There's something wrong with me. Or I have this, I have the model of the ideal relationship and I'm not happy. What's wrong with me? So if you take a cookie cutter model of relationship and apply it to billions of people, very few people are actually going to fit that because of the nature of uniqueness and the fact that we're all different. And we might be able to achieve that with one person, and then we'll get into a relationship with someone else and it does not work. Even though we stay the same, it's because we're looking, if you look at it through the energetic lens, we've got two different frequencies coming together. It's a chemical equation. Two different energies are going to create different outcomes. And then you look at those two energies together and you put that in a different environment, in a different context, and things are going to change. So we're constantly dealing with all of these variables. Quite often in relationships, we're encouraged to build this external life, which is the white picket fence. What does the white picket fence represent? Safety, material comfort, stability, all of these things outside of ourselves, but that doesn't by any means determine the quality of relationship. I see a lot of people who have this societal ideal of a relationship who are not deeply satisfied in their relationships, who might actually be quite unhappy at a core level, but don't want to either acknowledge it or accept it, or they come to learn to adapt and tolerate it because, on the other hand, they get all these things that society has told us that we should have, which is stability and consistency and security and safety. And so some people are okay to sacrifice their emotional fulfillment or their really deep sense of satisfaction for those values. And that's okay. But there are many, many, many of us who get into those relationships and we go, this is not for me. So rather than looking at the relationship from the outside with these external markers of what it means to either have been together for this long, to reach this anniversary, to be married, to have this many kids, to have this much wealth, to have this many cars, to be living in this area, all of these things that we seem to glorify in relationships quite a lot. Like when I think back in my old relationship when I was married, we were a lot of people's couple goals. And that was this really common statement that we'd hear from a lot of people. Is like, is relationship goals, couple goals. Like, I want what you guys have. And on so many levels, that's very, very, very true. Like, we had a fucking fantastic relationship on the majority of levels. Of course, we had some dysfunction in there, and that's what eventually led to the breakdown of the relationship. And you know, that was devastating for people. But like, other people were grieving the loss of our relationship, which I understand, but I really wanted to encourage them, like, please do not look at this as a failure. Look at how well we're choosing to go through this process. Look at the way that we're navigating the completion of our relationship and allow that to inspire you as well. The longevity of a relationship is not the marker of success. The satisfaction of the people in that relationship is. So it doesn't matter how long you've been in that relationship, doesn't matter how many assets you've accumulated as a couple, doesn't matter how many fancy photos you've got on Instagram of this lifestyle that you've created. What really, truly matters in relating is the quality of the relationship, the satisfaction of the people in it. So when I talk today about non-conventional relationships, I'm talking about every relationship in which the people are committed to say, we're not going after the cookie cutter. We're going to go and have a look at what way do we need to relate in order to get the maximum satisfaction out of this relationship. So you could still be monogamous. You could still have a white picket fence. You could still have 2.5 kids and choose to have a non-conventional relationship by doing this kind of work, by assessing it, refining it, really committing to the quality of the relationship, of improving it and constantly evolving it, and allowing the relationship to grow and evolve and change as you as individuals will grow and change. And that's where the non-conventional aspect comes from. It doesn't matter what it looks like on the outside. It doesn't matter if it's got polydynamics or not. It doesn't matter if it's got bisexual components or not. Like, I know a lot of people look at my life and think, well, that's great for you, Erin, and it's not that relevant for me because I'm not X, Y, and Z. And when I was a nomad and traveling the world just with me in a suitcase, a lot of people also thought the same thing. Well, that's well and good, Erin, but I don't want to leave my life behind. And I'm like, yeah, well, it doesn't actually matter about these external parts of my life. Let's look beyond the particulars and let's look at the principles of what I'm teaching, or what you could extrapolate from my life that's relevant to everyone. So this non-conventional aspect is essentially summarized as uniqueness. So when we come to look at our relationships, we're really looking at what defines us. What is that sense of us in the world? Whether you look at the world through an energetic lens or not, everyone has had the experience of either their own energetic us or seeing it in others. We have seen couples that are not strongly connected as an us, that are existing side by side, that are presenting to the world that they're side by side in their couplehood, and yet you can feel that there's a big disconnect there, or that something's ruptured in that relationship recently and things have changed. Like, we feel and sense that, whether you're recognizing that as an energetic structure or framework or architecture or not. And then at the same time, we've also seen those people who've created an us, even though they might not be telling the world that there's an us, but we're like, oh, what's going on there? We can either start to see the chemistry, there's something forming there, or if someone's trying to keep an affair quiet, oh, we can see like that's something's there. Like, that is the energetics of us. Now, given that I see the world through an energetic lens all the time, when I think about my own relationship, this is somewhere where in establishing a polydynamic, I probably did myself an injustice because I didn't focus strongly enough on creating that sense of us. Maybe this is my nature of being deeply empathic. Maybe this is my nature of being submissive, but I almost put myself into his energy and became part of his world, versus us creating our own independent world, that sense of us. That's so, so important, that there is a little bubble of energy that exists in the world that has no one but he and I. It's not only necessary, but it's exactly what will happen. But we can strengthen that sense of us, which strengthens the sense of relationship. So what is us? Us is the part of ourselves, or the thing that we create between us, that we don't share with others. There are plenty of things that we share between us as a couple that's inclusive of other people, and we can invite people into our home and we can share dinners together, and some of us will share sexuality with others. But there's still this essential nature at the core of that, which we don't share with others. Now, for many couples, that would be their sexuality, that they don't share their sexuality outside of that relationship. So that strengthens the sense of us. I know that there's a lot of personal jokes. Like, I love to laugh, if you haven't determined already. I love to laugh, and laughter and joy and humor is a very important thing in my relationships. And when I think back to my marriage in particular, I fucking laughed for 12 years straight. Like, I laughed so hard all the time. And we had so many personal jokes. We had like things that only we would understand. We had names that we call each other, or little markers that would take us back to this moment in time of something that brought us a lot of joy, and we kind of tap back into that energy. And that's like a little code language that we share, that not everyone is going to understand. There are definitely things that people would never understand. If someone was with us there for that joke, then they might be able to come back into the laughs again as we loop around back to that moment of time. But there's this sense of what is personal between you and I that is just for us. And when we look at dominant and submissive dynamics, these are very negotiated relationships. And even if you're not in a dominant and submissive dynamic in your relationship, although, let me tell you, you absolutely are in a dominant and submissive dynamic in your relationships. Whether it's negotiated or not, every single relationship has this. There is always a leader. There is someone that's wearing the pants. There is someone that's got control. That doesn't mean that they've got those things 24/7. It might flip back and forth. There might be someone who wears the pants in these areas of life, and there's someone else that wears the pants in these areas of life. Like, it is undeniable and unmistakable when someone is in the lead. And we see it in couples, and we see it in work relationships, and we see it in parent-child relationships. Like in parent-child relationships, you would assume that the parent is the dominant and the child is the submissive, but that's absolutely not true. How many times have we seen the child with the power and the child with the control, and the child is the one that's leading that circumstance, and the parent is out of control? Like, it's everywhere. Once you start seeing the world through this lens of DS, you can't unsee it. So when I look, the thing that I love about DS relationships is that in order to get the depth and the richness of the sexual expression, the trust and the vulnerability that needs to be created to express our sexuality in the way that we want to, you can't do this badly. You can't reach that destination if you don't have this very well-structured relationship, which is why I love it so much. And we can take those elements and apply them to all relationships, and all relationships can be benefited. But in traditional vanilla relationships, you can have some very, very, very dysfunctional patterns that last for a very, very, very long time, and you can get away with it. And you just can't do that in DS. If it's dysfunctional, it becomes abusive, and it erodes the quality of the relationship. It erodes the sustainability of the relationship. So if we can look at the principles of DS and apply it to all relationships, we'll all benefit. When I think about the structure and the amount of structure that's in my relationship, there is freedom. The structure creates freedom. That's such a profound concept to understand. And I see it in my business as well. You know, I am a very free-floating person. I'm very feminine in that sense. I don't create much of my own structure. But when that structure is created for me, I thrive. I absolutely thrive. Being too structured is detrimental. Being too fluid is detrimental. But finding that beautiful balance in the middle, where there's just enough structure that allows for the greatest flow of feminine energy in the middle of it, I am at my best. So we can look at that in relationships too. If we do not have enough structure in the relationship, it's just going to blur into this tepid, watery, who knows what. If we have too much structure in a relationship, then it becomes a prison. But if we can find that beautiful balance where we create just enough structure that allows for the maximum flow of ourselves as individuals, then we've found freedom. So I'm all for structure. I'm all for communication. And that's essentially where we're going today, is customizing that sense of us. So when we're focused on the quality of relating between the two of us, when that is where our commitment lies, where that is where our excellence and our commitment to excellence lies, then it allows for so many things to happen in our external world. All the moving pieces. I'm getting full body goosebumps as I say this. The world can move around us. The world can change. That's the nature of life itself, is that we're cyclical. We're going through the ups and the downs and the growth and the challenges. And when we have this sturdy, robust, reliable, trustworthy sense of us, when we have that security and that love and that tether to each other, then it allows us to get through the flow of life so much better for it. This is the whole reason why we're in relationship. You know, it's that sense of us, that we're a team, that we've got each other's back, that life is enriched by us being together, that the burdens of life are eased because we're carrying the load together, that we both get to contribute our genius and our gifts to the other one. And if our relationships are not enriching our lives, then they're not the relationships for us to be in. We can all have relationships that are enriching, but it takes a commitment, it takes a prioritization, and it takes work. And that work takes a lot of communication. And these kind of conversations bring me so much joy. I'm so grateful to be in a relationship now with someone who values communication to the same degree that I do, because this is where the excellence is formed, in my opinion. So when we look at customizing that sense of us, another amazing principle that comes from DS dynamics is rituals and routines. So rituals and routines, again, are a very commonplace part of relationships, but we might not look at it with consciousness. We might not have negotiated as such, but it's going to happen. There's going to be a habit that you two as a couple are in whether it's a good habit or whether it's a bad habit. They're happening all the time. Esther Perel, who's one of my favorite relationship experts, or my favorite, absolutely hands down, the number one relationship expert in my mind, she defines routines as concrete, repetitive actions that help us develop skills while creating continuity and order. She defines rituals as routines that are elevated by creativity, driven by intention, and imbued with meaning. So when we look at the rituals and routines that are part of a dominant and submissive dynamic, they become like a cue or a signal for the role that we're here to play for each other. So one of those cues or rituals or routines might be to greet your dominant when they get home each day and take their shoes off for them. Now, for people that are not submissive, they would fucking hate that. They don't want to take off someone's shoes. Like they don't, it's not something that brings them a positive sense. But for someone that's submissive, it creates this opportunity to express your submission, and it becomes a very sacred thing and a very heartfelt thing, because it is the signal that continuously affirms our place with each other. It's strengthening the relationship with this routine, the repetitive action. Then we know our place and we know how we provide for each other. But when we have that sense of ritual in it, it has that meaning and it has that heartfelt sense that's so powerful to put the heart into the ritual of it. And I'm a very ritualistic person. I'm a very devotional, ceremonious kind of person. That's always brought me a lot of joy to do things in a certain way. So when I think about my home and the kind of rituals and routines that I keep with myself, I make my bed every day because it brings me so much joy. Oh my God, I love making my bed. I love my bed. I love my bed in all its forms. But when my bed is made and I come home to this beautifully made bed and I turn the lights on and I've got beautiful mood lighting in my villa and I put my oils on and I put the music on, and then I'm home. I haven't just arrived home because that's a routine. I get home from wherever I've been. I take my shoes off. I put my bag down. But there's this meaning that I've put into making my space beautiful that brings me this sense of safety, of comfort, of relaxation. It's a transitional point of being out for the day or being at my man's house that I then come back into my own space, and I'm really signifying through that ritual that I'm in my own space. So these rituals that we can bring into our relationship, this way that we can serve each other. When I think about my marriage, and again, these things that are just naturally happening unconsciously, we would make breakfast for each other each day. There was, music was a big part of our relationship too, and having the music streaming through the house and taking the dog for a walk and getting coffee every morning. These moments in time strengthen the sense of us. So in establishing the rituals and routines that will strengthen a sense of us, I really recommend you have a look at your love languages. If you haven't done the love language quiz, it is a free quiz that you can do online that will tell you what is the most meaningful way for you to feel loved. And that might differ from your partner. So what typically happens is the ways that are most meaningful for us to receive also tend to be the way that we want to express love to someone else. But if that isn't their primary way of receiving love, then you can be doing things that have no impact on your partner. If you're buying them flowers every week because that's so meaningful for you, but they have no value on receiving gifts, and all they wanted was to hear your words, then it doesn't matter how much love you're pouring out, it's not being received. So we can have a look at our love languages as individuals and then build rituals and routines around those love languages. So if your love language is words, then you could create a ritual where every night, whether you're together or whether you live apart, you could do it by text message or you could do it face-to-face before bed, is that you acknowledge each other for one thing that you've done each day. So to express verbally what it is that you love about that person, or something you appreciate that person for, or something that they've achieved that you want to acknowledge each day. If you have a love language around acts of service, then it could be that every morning I'm going to make your morning coffee, or I'm going to warm your towel for when you get out of the shower. I'm going to dry you off when you get out of the shower. If your love language is quality time, then it might be a commitment to spending Sundays together, and knowing that Sundays are just your day, and that no one else takes your time or attention for that day, that half day, that couple of hours. Like, I know parents with kids might not get the privilege of having a whole day together, but they might say, okay, then Wednesday nights is our time. And then we can have one of those routines of transition, add ritual to it, that we know that when the kids go down on Wednesday nights, that we then change into these clothes, or I put on lingerie, or we burn that oil, or we put on that music, or we move to that room, and then that becomes our time. So when we understand each other's love languages and our own love languages, then we can build these rituals and routines that hold incredible meaning for each of us, and that will continue to strengthen that sense of us. I would also recommend creating routines around dealing with conflict. So again, especially if you've got children and you've got busy time and something comes up between you and you find that you're starting to like nitpick at each other, make a commitment to say, we don't take stabs at each other. We don't bicker at each other. We acknowledge the fact that there's conflict here. And we know that once we get alone time, so at the end of the day, excuse me, when the kids have gone down, that we know that we must address the conflict that came up that day. We do not go to bed without addressing the conflict. So it might be to acknowledge, or you have a code word that says, oh, that's a trigger. We've got to deal with that tonight. We agree to put it aside. We continue with our commitments for the day. And once it becomes our time, we sit down and we have a routine way of dealing with conflict. We have an acknowledgement. Okay, this is conflict resolution time. That means we're both going to commit to being calm. That means we're going to both commit to not cutting each other off. We might have a talking stick that allows each of us to talk in turns. And once you feel like you've resolved that conflict, then have a ritual at the end, a way of rebonding. That might be making out, that might be having sex, it might be holding each other, it might be eye gazing, it might be giving each other a massage, or going to bed like spooning each other, or something that signifies that that conflict has been completed, or we've done the best that we can at completing this conflict now. So even navigating the conflict can come with that sense of ritual and routine, and something that we can come to rely on because we're both committed to it. And the more reliable it is, the more trustworthy it is, that we know that this is how we show up for each other, then the stronger that sense of us becomes. I think those transitional times are very, very important. If we have a busy job and we have a lot of responsibility at work, or a lot of stress around work, to be able to transition into a space in our relationship where we're letting go of that responsibility, which is, for me, the value of submission. Is I'm a very strong, independent, powerful woman that runs my own business, that needs to be dominant in life in so many ways, and that is naturally more dominant than most people, and naturally more efficient than most people, and just fucking get out of my way, everyone. I'm going to do it myself because it's just fucking easier if I do it myself. I need that space and that moment, that signifier. Erin, it's time to switch off now. It's time to turn off big fat brain. It's time to move into submission. That transition from one mode to another becomes more powerful. It means that I'm more switched on when I'm on, and I'm more switched off when I'm off. It doesn't bleed into each one because I'm still half in work mode and trying to be submissive at the same time. So if you've got a busy job, if you're a mum, if you're caring for a parent, then our relationship and that sense of us can be this reprieve from all of those responsibilities. We're coming back to each other, and the joy and the revitalization that comes from being in our bubble. So mark those transitions with rituals and routines, so that you can be so fully present in the relationship, and then so fully present in life outside of the relationship. Now, another key component of customized relationships and unique ways of relating also pertains to our sense of independence. So the quality of the relationship is only going to be as good as the quality of relationship we have to ourselves. No relationship is going to improve until you're improving the relationship you have with yourself. It's actually the individuals that improve. That is what changes the relationship. You cannot change the relationship without changing yourself. So as much as I'm all about changing relationships and committing and investing in relationships and putting in the fucking effort, truly the effort lies with you and your relationship with yourself, your sense of independence and the quality. So let's come back to this analogy of a chemical equation of my energy and your energy mixed together, and we make a third frequency that is not yet seen on the planet unless we're together. It can only come about from your frequency and my frequency mixing together. So if we summarize that into something very fucking basic, like 2 ingredients making a cocktail, the quality of those ingredients is going to drastically change the quality outcome of the cocktail. So if you're using really cheap and nasty alcohol, you're going to taste that in the cocktail. If you're using fucking top label, beautifully crafted alcohol into the cocktail, you're going to have a much better cocktail. So the quality of our relationship is directly determined by the quality of ourself. So we need to make sure that we have this sense of independence and understanding of who we are as an individual, as well as who we are in that relationship. And so that independence also will come with a sense of privacy. And the level of privacy that we have in our own relationship is going to be determined by who we're relating to and what we decide as a couple. But I think that there's a lot of relationships where privacy is not expected, and that it's some sort of sign of love to give you full access to my life and my phone and my emails, and that we don't hide from each other and we've got nothing to hide. And that's valid and good, having nothing to hide, having no secrets. I don't believe in deceitfulness, but what I absolutely do believe is autonomy and privacy and independence strengthens our relationship. So I will never give anyone access to my phone in relationship ever again. I will never give anyone access to my emails ever again. Not because I'm hiding, not because I'm being deceitful, but because it's important for me to maintain a sense of autonomy and independence. It's important for me to have relationships with others that are not encroached on by this relationship, and vice versa. If your partner needs to see or is checking up on everything or has some sort of paranoia or expectation, then your relationship with others is encroached on by that. That comes into your bubble and your sense of us with someone else. When you're monogamous, it might be easier to share everything and it makes sense because there's nothing to hide. But if you're poly, then it's absolutely necessary that you do maintain privacy between these relationships, and that what we share, any vulnerability that I've offered, any trauma of mine that I've shared with you, any insecurities that I have, I'm choosing to share that with you. I'm not choosing to share that with everyone else in your network. And that's my prerogative of who I share it with. So it's necessary that we maintain that respect for others. That principle is still equally as important whether we're monogamous or whether we're poly. So choosing what privacy levels are right for you, making sure that you do maintain some sense of privacy and some sense of independence, and negotiating that and communicating that in your relationship in a way that the other person knows that it's not a threat, that it's not because you're being deceitful, that it's not because you want to be able to pull the wool over their eyes and get away with something. If that level of mistrust exists in the relationship, that's a much bigger problem that you guys need to address, and to create things in your rituals and routines and your sense of us that will allow for the greatest sense of healing of that mistrust, rather than placating the mistrust and just, okay, well, I'm going to hold myself back from doing these things so that you don't get triggered. That's not ultimately healing. We want these relationships to be the ground in which we evolve and grow and heal these things from the past. So it's a fine line between, I'm still going to be independent, I'm still going to do what's right for me, I'm always going to hold you in high regard and your needs and your values, and we're going to walk this fine line carefully, but I'm not going to deny my own sense of independence to try and please you. That's codependency, and that is where we see the majority of relationships existing in the world at the moment is extremely codependent. Like, you walk down to the local shops and the shopping center and you look at the majority of relationships, you put them all in a lineup, How many of them are codependent? The majority. And it's just how our society has functioned for a very long time, and it's no one's fault. But there are far more evolved ways of relating, and to recognize that Erin being the best version of Erin and the highest quality of Erin is going to foster the highest quality of relationships that I have across the board, with my intimate relationships, with my family relationships, with my friends, with my employees, with my clients. All of this requires Erin to be the best version of Erin. And privacy is very different from secrecy. If we have secrets and if we're hiding things from a sense of shame, or that we're going to hurt or damage someone else, that is a heavy energy to carry. If you're doing things that is going to hurt the ones that you love, you need to look at that and say, am I acting within my own integrity? Or does my partner have a wounding around this that is going to be unnecessarily triggered by that? You can still be in integrity and people will get hurt. That is an inevitable part of human nature. We cannot protect everyone from pain. And to deny our own truth and our own alignment to protect someone from pain is not loving. The most loving thing that we can do is show up as our best self. So it's a very fine line to decide between what to share and what not to share. The quality of the relationship is also going to be determined by the quality of honesty. To deepen our intimacy and to deepen the quality of relationships requires that we start with a foundation of honesty. Now, we can still have privacy in honesty. This is a very nuanced topic that I'm going to do my best to try and express. Do I believe in radical honesty? Yes, absolutely. Do I believe in discretion? Yes. We often have to ask ourselves, who is this for? Who am I being honest for? Am I trying to free myself of the guilt and shame of this and I've just got to say it? And that's going to be very destructive to the other person. Am I not being honest because I want to continue getting away with something that I know that they're not going to like and I don't want to deal with that? Am I recognizing that this information does not add constructive benefit to my relationship and would be unnecessarily destructive? And in which case, I can keep it to myself with my integrity, knowing that this is best for my partnership, knowing that we've negotiated boundaries around privacy and independence. Some people don't want to know, and that's okay. Some people want to know everything, and that's okay. But when these things are negotiated, then we get to have boundaries around our independence and our privacy that allow us to act with integrity. That's the best I can do at describing that right now. Maybe this is a whole nother podcast episode about honesty in relationships, but that is a very important part of us. Us does not mean I completely merge into you and I offer you my everything and I cease to exist. No. I am still me and you are still you, and we bring the best parts of ourselves into this relationship. We commit to being the best parts of ourselves in this relationship, and I'm still entitled to have my sense of sovereignty and autonomy and independence as well. So in summary, my friends, it comes down to getting really clear definitions of us and knowing that in that freedom, in that structure, we find freedom. That the more clearly defined and negotiated our relationships are, the more they're going to serve us. If we can find that beautiful fine line between freedom and structure, if we can be our whole selves and flow within the structures of our relationship, and that we continue to negotiate these relationships and the structures of our relationships to allow for the ongoing growth and evolution of who we are as an individual. If we can find routines and rituals that hold meaning and strengthen that sense of us based on our individuality, then no matter what's happening outside of us, we have that sense of us, the tether to each other that enriches our life. You know what? One other thing that I didn't talk about is completions. Is actually when it comes time to dissolve the sense of us. That is a beautiful moment in time. We are trained by society to be afraid of that, to avoid that that's a bad thing. Actually, that is such a beautiful time that can be navigated with as much grace as entering a relationship. So to complete the relationship in a ritualistic way, to offer each other love and the gratitude, and to say, what did you get out of this? What are you walking away with? How are you a better person for this? This is what I'm walking away with. This is how you've blessed my life. This is how I'm a better person than I was when I entered this relationship. And thank you. What a beautiful fucking way to transition out of relationships. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode, my friends. And as always, I'd love to hear from you. Please come and find me via Instagram and share the love. Let me know your takeaways. Let me know what you loved. Let me know if something triggered you, or if you have any unanswered questions. I want to know it all. If there's anything else you'd like to hear about, or someone you'd like me to interview, please let me know. And again, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode. You have all my love always. And until then, laugh loud and fuck louder.